I would say something like, I'm going to pitch this piece to 10 places, and if it doesn't land, I'm just going to publish it. I played my part. I did my role, and we can only do what's in our control. And getting published is so subjective. I mean, I like to tell people every piece that has gone viral or mini viral was rejected first.
On this episode, I was joined by Paulette Perhach. She is a regular contributor to the New York Times, and her work has previously appeared in Vox, Elle, The Washington Post, and many other publications. Her book, Welcome to the Writer's Life, was selected as one of Poets and Writers' best books for writers. She serves writers as a coach. She was nominated for the Blog Her Voices of the Year Award for one of her essays and is currently working on her first novel. We talked all about the writing process. She shared what makes for a great pitch and shared some great stories along the way. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Paulette, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm
For
excited.
no reason.
Yeah, this is going to be so fun because you are a full-time writer and writing coach, and you are in tons of magazines and you've written tons of articles. You have such a cool background, and I'm so excited to dig into it because I think a lot of people have this idea of they fantasize about being a writer, and it's just so glamorous, and I'm sure it's not always glamorous. So why don't we start with high overview? What do you do now, and how did you come along and get to where you are?
Yeah. So right now I am a writer, creative writer, freelance writer, and I also have a coaching program for writers called the Finishing School for Writers, and am the founder of a software called the Writers Mission Control Center.
So cool. So tell us a little bit about your journey, because before I hit record, I was asking Paulette about her journey into how did you leave corporate and start your own business back in 2016. So we wanted to leave it for the podcast so you could all
Yeah.
listen.
So the world has changed completely since I told my best friends at the bus stop when I was 10 years old that I wanted to be a writer. My dream was for magazines to send me all over the world, etc. The magazine industry has changed incredibly. The newspaper industry has changed incredibly. And so I've really evolved with it. And so I've worked for a magazine. I was a small town reporter. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And it was in Peace Corps that I decided I wanted to write creatively. And when I came back from Peace Corps, girlfriend just needed a job. So I got a job at a tech company writing proposals. And this was a really great job for me at the time. It was like a total pain in the butt. I'm like, I want to lay in a hammock and write all day, like I did in Peace Corps. And instead, I was working really hard. But the cool thing about Peace Corps is that it just blew the top right off my brain. Like, I was in the Southern Hemisphere, and I remember one morning or one evening standing and looking for the Big Dipper. And I was like, oh, I can't find it. I'm like, these are different stars because this is what's on the underside, more space. And I literally, like, I swooned, and I describe it as like it was the word up leaving my body, right? Like, we are floating in space. So to come from that to like zoom in, what have we done with this incredible experience of being alive? It's like put people in boxes and make them like type on little smaller boxes and like invent this terrible language that no one wants to speak. It's like, I'll circle back with you and ping you in the morning. Who wants to talk like that? And then on top of that, in this particular organization, there was a culture of like, in the meetings, we all nod and pretend that, yes, we agree. And then on the side, we like, and so it was a really unhealthy environment. And we were all putting on this terrible play no one wanted to be in. And I remember that one afternoon in Seattle. So Seattle this summer is like sacred. You're like, the sun is out, right? And you're like, oh, I have to go to my little box because it's the box time. And box time has nothing to do with what life feels like or what it's like outside or what the weather is. And so I was in my box time, and we had a freelance graphic designer come in and visit our office, and he had a meeting with us. And then I watched him walk out the door, like walk outside during box time. He got to go on the outside because he was a freelancer. And I literally I envisioned it like my little nose pressed up against the window, like watching him leave. And I was like, I'm not allowed to leave the building. And I remember that particular weekend, it was going to rain all weekend. So it was like, and it was sunny that day. And like, I just wanted to enjoy the day. There was no reason my work what needed to be done that day. I could have done it over the weekend. But because I was in the box time system, I was not allowed, a fully grown adult woman, to leave the building.
You
And
weren't
I was
allowed to
like,
step
I'm
outside and
done.
just go for a little walk around the building or something?
I was allowed to step outside, but I wasn't allowed to say, I choose to instead do my work on Saturday because the weather is nicer today. I wasn't allowed to flow with the natural rhythms of life, which is something that I saw in South America was this more flowing with the rhythms of life. And I just decided that I wanted a life that felt that way.
How long were you in the Peace Corps?
2 years, and I lingered in Paraguay for a while, so I was there for about 2.5 years.
And what inspired that?
A lot. I mean, I'd always wanted to travel. I'd always wanted to do something big. I wasn't in a great spot in my life. The recession was coming on. I worked at a newspaper. Things were really bad in the newspaper. I wanted to do something big, and Peace Corps was there. And I mean, I was so anxious about joining. It was like I had like a year-long anxiety attack before I joined. It was this wild thing. And then I realized that my biggest fear was that I would go down there and I would fail and I would come home early. And once I realized that that was the source of this huge anxiety around it, I was like, okay, I'm willing to risk that I will fail and then come back. And I did the whole thing.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. So, all right, so you're in box time, it sucks, you wanna leave, and you gotta get out of there. And you said you were 10 and you knew you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Why?
my
What
best
was your
friends, just always loving books. I loved R.L. Stein. All the other girls are reading like Babysitter's Club and like murder. And so their grandma actually was this really successful romance novelist. And so it just goes to show the importance of like what you see and what you're exposed to. And so I told them at the bus stop when I was 10, I wanted to be a writer. And my best friend said, do you have any idea how hard that is? And to this day, we're still friends. And whenever I'm complaining about it, I'll say, you warned me 30 years ago. You warned me.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
So when you left corporate, were you doing any freelance writing or did you just like leave and figure it out as you left?
well, so I left that job in a pretty dramatic moment. They had promised me another position, and 3 months I quit. They promised me another position. I stayed. 3 months later, they said, we can't actually promise you that position. And I said, so I'm just going to go have a beer. And the CEO said, that's what I would do. So literally had like a clear out my cubicle moment. Then I got a part-time job. And so I was doing halftime and then freelancing. And then I had my first piece go viral. And that was when I felt confident that I could get enough work to keep up freelancing.
What was that first piece?
It was called it was called The Story of a Fund, and it was about how any woman should have enough money to tell someone to off if a off is deserved.
Oh, interesting. And now where was that? Is that in the New York Times?
No, it was actually in a place I hadn't even heard of. I pitched it to one publication, and they said, "This would be great for our sister publication that I hadn't heard of called The Billfold." And so it was in this tiny little publication, and it went viral all over the world.
Okay, so one of the things that you teach your students is pitching,
Mhm.
which I feel like pitching alone is just such an art form. You have to craft it in the right way. What is the point of view? Are people going to pick it up? So, what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when pitching a story idea?
Okay, so I would say that I wouldn't call it an art form, I would say it's a craft. And that is why I have AI help me because this is not my art. And so one of the biggest mistakes is that they pitch a topic rather than a story. So I want to do a story about the Hawaiian Islands. Well, like, what about the Hawaiian Islands? Usually you want to think about combining two or even three aspects. So I pitched a story about, like, my last piece in the New York Times was about financial ruin and suicide. So preventing suicide when it comes to financial ruin. And so that's not just like, I want to talk about when people go into debt, right? I want to talk about when people go into debt and what prevents them from making that ultimate decision. And so thinking about what is really what they call the angle. And the angle is this when there's two places intersect.
This kind of reminds me of when comedians talk about how they have to go up on stage and they are constantly trying to figure out their point of view, like what's their
Mm,
perspective and
mhm,
how is it different?
mhm.
because someone might say a similar joke, but it's different because it's their experience, their perspective.
Yeah.
And so it is kind of like figuring out that twist. You have so many articles, many of which are in the New York Times, which for most writers is a dream. Like that would be like a
Mhm.
dream publication. Was there a moment in time when you got an article in a magazine that you just thought, I have made it. This is my dream publication?
Probably Elle was one for sure. The first time in the New York Times was amazing, and I think going viral is my favorite thing. No matter where it is, it's this kind of vote, right? Where it's not an award that was decided on by a few people, but it's like each reader says, "You've gotta read this. You've gotta read this. You've gotta read this," and then it goes viral.
So do you get what kind of feedback do you get when people are reaching out to you when it comes to your writing? What do they say about your writing?
So people, I tell really vulnerable stories. And so people say, "Thank you so much. I went through the same kind of thing. I really resonated with this." It helps people articulate what they're going through and maybe understand it in a different way. And the coolest thing about the fund was people saying, "I gave this to my daughter," or "I saved this for when my daughter turns 18 and then I'm going to give it to her."
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you love teaching the art and craft of writing. Your students come to you because they want to become a better writer.
Mhm.
What are some of the biggest what are some of the challenges that they're coming to you for? Is it the writing? Is it the
Mhm.
ideas? Is it the time? What does that look like?
I think it's the actual doing of it, which is why I've really focused on that with creating the finishing school for writers and my Finish framework. It is the behavioral economics, if you will, of sitting down and actually putting the time toward writing, which doesn't start with your calendar. It starts with believing that you deserve a space in the world and that your words are valid and that your story is important. And that can feel really difficult, especially for certain populations like women.
Your program, you have a group, a program, whatever you would call it,
Mhm.
like where you invite people and you're just coming together to write for 45 minutes.
Yes.
And I've been part of writing groups like that, and it is remarkable what people will write in 45 minutes.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's called A Very Important Meeting. We meet every day at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, and I started during the pandemic because I was like, "Nobody's writing, we're all alone, and we're all freaked out. Our attention is being pulled completely to everything that's going on in the world." So I wanted everyone to help everyone pull their attention back in, focus, and write and create community, and it was so beautiful, such a beautiful balm during the pandemic and lockdown, and certainly I can't imagine living without it now. Like, I can't yeah, I must do it.
So I published my first book 2 years ago, and sitting down and actually doing the writing was sometimes
Mhm,
really challenging to figure
mhm,
out what you wanted to say, and just this idea of, "I wanna sit down and write a masterpiece. It has to be perfect right off the
yes,
bat," and that does not happen, but I often wonder with writing coaches how, because I actually did have a writing coach when I was writing my book because I wanted to
mhm,
get
great,
better at writing, so
mhm,
how can someone get better at writing? Obviously, you have to, when people talk about writing on a consistent basis and writing every day, that's one thing, but then how do you take that
mhm.
work, analyze it, and actually get better and improve?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think listening to craft talks, and there are a lot of them online actually, joining classes and getting feedback from other people, and really reading. Reading, I think, is the most important thing. I'm reading a wonderful book right now, Mothers and Other Fictional Characters. And, it's funny, I read a piece last night about deciding what to do with your frozen embryos. It has nothing to do with my life. I am, child free, plan to be child free, have never frozen any parts of my body. And, but it was just such a reminder. I was riveted by this piece. And people say, like, "Oh, why would anyone want to read my work?" It's like, this is an amazingly told story. And it does not have any, like, I'm not learning anything about my own personal life or any decisions I ever have to make. It's just about being human. And the way that she rendered it was gorgeous. And so, yeah, reading helps you understand what's possible. It can also be dangerous because it feels like everyone else is so far ahead of you. Like, I read Jesmyn Ward's Salvage the Bones and literally woke up at like 4 in the morning with total anxiety about like, I'm not a real writer. She's a real writer. Like, she's amazing. And my friend Laura had to talk me down and she was like, listen, you don't have to be Jesmyn Ward. Jesmyn Ward is like the best of the best. Like, you're a writer. I was like, thank you. So especially when you're a beginning writer, so you kind of are like, I'm just beginning and I'm going to dedicate myself to really reading better, more quality work. And so you have this huge gap and it can be really intimidating, but it's important to get through it.
Yeah. Okay, so as you said that, it reminds me of Ira Glass's, Taste Gap,
Yes,
which is the best
best.
thing ever, and
Yeah.
also, I read that you did not get an internship at This American Life with Ira Glass, but you did pay to meet him? So wait,
Like a creep.
why,
Yeah.
and why did you pay him, and what did you ask him?
When you say pay him, it sounds creepier, but like essentially I did.
Well, you actually have it. I think you wrote on your website, "I paid to meet him like a creep,"
Yeah.
which
Yeah, I
cracked me
did.
up.
Um, so it's the only time I've ever done a meet and greet. I think they're so weird. And I'm like, oh, it's Ira Glass. Because I was so when I was in Peace Corps, I had a 4-hour bus ride to the Capitol and which is so boring. And these women would get on and sell something called chipa, which is like a cornbread with cosito, this like really hot drink in this super flimsy cup. And so you would like almost burn yourself every time. And I had started listening to This American Life. And what I noticed was that during this drive, certain places would be marked with what was happening in the story I was listening to as I passed that tree or that house. And over the 2 years, it kind of like layered and layered and layered in this really cool way. And I fell in love with like oral storytelling during that time, listening to This American Life and The Moth. And so I appreciated him so much. And I was just in love with what he had brought to my life. And meeting him just felt like I totally wanted to do that. Meeting him actually taught me an important lesson about meeting fancy writers or people that you really admire, people who are like kind of a celebrity, which he's like either a celebrity or like completely not a celebrity, depending on who you ask. And this event was actually poorly managed so that he like walked in the room and we all just like descended upon him like a very polite zombie squad to like, get your like minute with him. And when he was talking with me, he was just fully engaged with me, even though like everyone's all around me. And instead of saying, "I love you," which I've said to other people, and they're like, "Who are you? What's your name?" I told him that story of how his work affected me, and he was like, "Oh," like I noticed like he had this moment of like he learned something and he was interested, and that became my formula for kind of like how to interact with people who I admire, who get a lot of the like, "I love you." Um, and so it was a really beautiful moment, worth the $80.
Oh, yeah, what I always find interesting is I think what is that saying? Never meet your heroes,
Mhm.
and how so often it's which I mean, of course, I wanna meet all the people that
Mhm.
whose work I appreciate, but, we're all human beings. We all
Yeah.
have the same this is why I think great writing resonates with so many people because we all have those feelings of even the best in their craft, they still have those moments of, "Was that good? Are people
Mm.
gonna like this?" Which I think can be challenging for beginners or even people that kind of have dabbled in it to share their work. Like when you think about someone that's out there and they're writing and they want to share their work with the world, if they have a piece, they have something that they are proud of, but they
Mhm.
also kind of like what Ira Glass talks about when with his taste gap, it's
Mhm.
not as good as they know it could be or that they want it to
Mhm.
be, but that's as good as it's going to be for them at that moment, at that
Yeah.
time. So, do we push through and do we post it and share it, or do we keep it and hold on to it and wait? What is your
Oh,
thoughts around that?
so I think you can always rewrite it later, and the market will tell you if it's not ready. If it's not ready, it's just gonna get rejected, I mean, yeah, you can post it on your own platform, but I would try for the publication and see what you think or hire some help. I've been toiling away on this novel, and I just hired Steve Almond to read the first chapter, and he gave me all this feedback, and I was like, God, I wish I had hired you 2 years ago, you know? And so getting some outside perspective can help you be better sooner.
Mm. All right, you love crafts books. You wrote a craft book
Mhm.
called Welcome to the Writer's Life, and it was selected as one of poets and writers' best books for writers. Congratulations. That's such a
Thank
cool
you.
honor. So,
That was, like, the moment where I was like, "Oh, okay, I did enough. That was enough. It was good enough."
oh,
Big exhale, yeah.
that's no, I mean, that's really awesome, like, being able to write a book for writers, like, that to me feels like a lot of pressure. If you're writing a book teaching writers how to write, it better be good.
Yeah, it was about what I learned by moving to a place that had a writer center and and meeting a bunch of writers. So, it was kind of for the people who don't have a lot of writers in their life, and it's like, "Let me tell you what I've noticed here now," now that I have seen, and by the time that the book came out, I had the viral piece, so that felt like, "Okay, yes, I am a writer."
What other books do you recommend for writers that are trying to get better at their craft?
I'm loving Steve Almond's book, Truth is the Arrow, Mercy is the Bow. I just finished Peter Ho Davies' The Art of Revision, which was a beautiful craft book. I love craft books that are in themselves beautiful books, and I think that one was. Another example of one of those is Story by Robert McKee, which is a really big, thick book that you might read like a chapter here, a chapter there, kind of go back to it. It's kind of more of like a reference, or you can read it cover to cover. I did not. Um, and, the classics, the first 2 books I found, I was really lucky to find these first 2 writing books in my little Peace Corps library that we had, was Bird by Bird and The Artist's Way. So, can't do better than that for the first 2 books you find trying to be a
Yeah.
writer.
Oh my gosh, for sure. Those are such great books.
Yeah.
Anne Lamott is the best.
Yeah.
And Julia Cameron, do you do morning pages?
I did for a really long time, and then during the pandemic, I was having, like, the crappiest, darkest time, as a lot of us were, and I didn't wanna, it's like, I don't know who said this, but, like, if you squeeze an orange, orange juice comes out, I didn't wanna squeeze the lemon. I knew it was gonna come, or didn't wanna squeeze the orange. Like, I knew it was gonna come out. I didn't wanna just complain and whine. I was kind of sick of my own whining and complaining, and so I stopped for a while. And I'm kind of off the boat still. I'm ready. I'm like, I haven't actually journaled. I've lived in New York for 6 months. I moved to New York and it's been 6 months. And I'm like, oh, I'm not like getting any of this down on paper. I now have a 60-pound luggage filled with all my journals too. So I'm very aware of this like physical space that all this, handwritten work is taking up. And so having feelings about that, I kind of need to regroup on it. I needed to take a break. Yeah, I was just like, this is becoming very repetitive and just kind of like, I'd
Yeah.
rather write stories about other people right now or work on my novel.
Yeah. Well, you write every day with your community. So,
I do, yeah. So was in a place where I felt like I want to be creating work rather than being like, what's going on in my heart and head? It's like, I know what's going on in my heart and head. It's not great. I'm not into going in there right now. But I was proud of myself for like, yeah, Julia Cameron is the priestess. She's the high priestess. We bow down to her, and we're all gonna do what's best for us in any moment. And so you don't like all these gurus or whatever. You don't want to have just one person like I do what they say and everything's gonna be fine. You're gonna make your own path. And at that point, I was like, my path needs to diverge right now because I'm not into it.
I think that anyone who journals has probably can relate because there are definitely periods of time when it does feel like, okay, I just wrote this. I mean, this is like get out. It's almost like with with personal development, I feel the same way. It's almost
Mm,
can you just read too much that it's to the point where you're like, you know what? I am too self-aware. I am too in my mind. Let me just get out of it and just
yeah.
really it's the creating, which is what I appreciate is the actual
Mhm.
physical doing of the work. That is the thing that is going to get you out of your head. And so focusing on whatever that creative art is, whether it's writing or podcasting or whatever it is, People talk about imposter syndrome a lot.
Mhm.
Do your students deal with that, and what is your take on it?
Yeah, it's, like, right there, like, in your fanny pack of feelings all the time. Everyone feels that way. I have never met anyone who's like, "I feel fully equipped and worthy of being a writer. It's great. What's the big deal?" No, literally no one, and that's the great part about being in community is to be like, "Anyone else? Anyone else?" And people are like, "Yeah, all of us." You're like, "Oh." So because you think that that it's correct, that you're like, in my judgment, I am not worthy of being a writer." And so you think that that is the real story, where the real story is every writer feels they are not worthy of being a writer. And so like, cool, we can scoot past that. And then you, especially with meditation, what I appreciate is you learn to distance yourself and hear your thoughts and to be like, "Oh, that's imposter syndrome. Okay, cool. We can keep going even with imposter syndrome, you know? That's totally fine. Self-doubt? Yeah, completely normal. Great. Check. Everything's in place. We're all good. Let's go."
Make it happen. How what do you have a process for collecting ideas and deciding what ideas you actually wanna turn into a pitch?
Yeah, I decided to create a software. Kind of an extreme reaction to being an ADHD writer, but I made a software called the Writer's Mission Control Center. So I can text myself my story ideas there. And they are, a lot of people text themselves their story ideas, but it just sits in your text thread, or they email themselves and it just sits in your inbox. So I text it in and it's in the list of story ideas and a few kind of triaging points I use are, is this a story no one else can tell? Like, when I was first doing this exercise, I came up with the story idea of like, "Oh, that time I got attacked by my roommate's pit bull. Yeah, that's a story not very many people can tell. Let me write that one down." And that's been like one of my favorite stories I've ever written because that's wild. Um, is this story important? Can this help people? That's how I decided to write the crowdfund story. I looked at my list and said, which of these is important? Um, is it a story for right now, right? Like, I have one, most of your stories are, you can use them anytime. Had this great satire piece that would only be good during the pandemic. So, or lockdown, you know? So is this the story of the moment? Can this story wait, or should I move this up to write it now? So those are like a few things you want to think about with stories.
So you created your own software, you're like, "Yep, I'm just gonna do this on my own." Most people are not doing that. However, no big deal.
It's been a nightmare. No, I'm
Oh,
sorry. It's not like I made a software. It's like, it's been a thing
oh,
for just about
yeah.
a decade. No big deal.
No big
It's
deal.
fine.
It's
Yeah.
fine. No, that's really cool, but when it comes to today, we have access to AI and so many people are
Mhm,
leveraging it, so there's a lot of conversation in the writing community around AI, and
mhm.
do you use it? Do you not? How do you use it? So what is your take?
My take is, yes, I wanna think about the tsunami coming at me. I'm also very busy building my surfboard. So, I don't use it to write. I do use it as a thinking partner. Um, I had someone just really put the fear of God into me about basing all of my income on my ability to write for other people and explain information. I think it's really going to take over the mediocre writing that I did to get good at being a writer, especially a freelance writer. I don't think it's ever gonna be like the best writer. And so I've been studying it for a half an hour a week for about a year now. Um, I created a GPT to critique pitches, which I called powerhouse pitches. And I specifically said, like, this like will not write your pitches for you. It will critique your pitches. And I trained it on my own pitches, so I decided to put them in in the software. I wish these AI companies were not just like taking whatever they want to take. I wish it didn't use so much energy. There's like concerns we need to have, but it is this genie that is out of the bottle and it's here. And I am really a realist. I think that's one thing that Peace Corps made me is like a realist. And it's like you need to do what you need to do to survive. And this has fallen in our lap. And so I've really been thinking about what can AI do, what can't AI do, and that's been why I've been more focusing on personal essays and saying, AI can, yeah, write a pretend personal essay, but it can't have a human experience and render it on the page. I use it for cooking a lot. I ask it for recipes, which like you can't do if you don't know how to cook too, because it'll like you gotta kind of like check it. It's your intern, right? And my favorite use of it was at a karaoke bar. They had 3 Chapel Roan songs, and I asked it which of these is the easiest to sing, and it told me, and that was the one I
Oh
sang.
so which one was it?
I think it was Pink Pony Club. Yeah,
All right. Well, that's always a fun song.
yeah, it was a good time. And I actually, okay, never mind. Wait, I have a new favorite use for it, which was just the other day. I was having a hard time and I said, give me a pep talk in the voice of Dolly Parton.
Oh my gosh.
10 out of 10 recommend. And one of the best, so I'm working on my novel, and one of the best days I had, literally, I talked to AI about my novel for 2 hours. And I
Yeah.
said, in the style of Save the Cat, like, help me analyze like these plot points. I would never just dump my novel in AI, but I just had a conversation about it with AI. So that kind of like that thinking partner is really powerful with it.
Of all the things that you do, you're coaching, you're creating apps, you're writing novels, you're writing articles, you're doing all the things. Do you have a favorite? What do you love most about spending your days?
So meeting and talking with new people, this kind of stuff is super fun for me. When I make myself cackle at my desk writing, I love seeing someone else have a breakthrough, seeing someone else get it or have a moment of a shift in how they think. Like during the Finishing School for Writers, one of our events is a members only open mic where we all read each other our stories, and seeing what I like to tell my students is that like I say, notice how your essays are already doing the thing, right? Because even in classes, I have a class on essays called Posing Naked on the Page. One student will say, that what you read last week really helped me re-see parenting, my son. And so the essays are already living their lives and doing, yes, on a smaller scale than we want, right? We want the big whatever, but like they're already making that impact on the readers, and seeing my students get to see their own work affect someone else and the kind of the full cycle of it. That's one of my favorite parts. Can I tell a story that I think would be really good for your podcast?
Oh my gosh, please.
So I have this talking about, like, oh, I want this to go viral. I want it in the New York Times, which like little egos, we all want that, right? One of my favorite artistic experiences was a single service, or sorry, one of my favorite artistic experiences was a single serving art piece. And I was in a retreat and we all read something out loud. And what I read that day was an excerpt from my piece about getting attacked by my roommate's pit bull. So it's super dramatic and the fangs and, there's like just this really dramatic piece about getting attacked by a pit bull, thinking I could die. And that night, we all were hanging out, drinking wine, and there were these really aggressive raccoons on the property. Like they were at the top of the stairs outside, and we started walking up, and they started descending like toward us. And we're like, and they're like stealing our food. And so we're goofing around. And at midnight, I decided to take my piece and make it a parody about the raccoons. So like taking the like structure of my pit bull piece, but replacing it with these like raccoons and just having like making this silly kind of satire piece. And the person I was staying with in my cabin came in and she's had a bunch of wine and she crawls into bed and I read her the piece and she just laughs and laughs in her bed. And then like a second after I finish it, my computer dies and I lose the piece forever. And I just kind of love that, like, I got an idea, I created it, one other person enjoyed it, and then it was over. And yes, I was like, oh shit, like no one else can read this and da da da. Da." But like for some reason, that remains one of my favorite artistic experiences because of it just seems like some kind of like Cohen or like, the sand drawings that you just blow away, right? It was just so simple and beautiful. And to just have that one little, it's like, it's a unit of art. I think there was like, I was like, this is a unit, one single unit of art. And that was just the day that I realized it. It was fun.
I love that. And it was this moment in time that you shared with this one person.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's really cool. Oh,
That was
thank
really
you
fun.
for sharing that. So, with that, a lot of people want to be published in a magazine or whatever.
Mhm.
And there's also obviously people can share online. Getting in a publication takes a
Mhm.
lot of work. It does take a pitch, and how do you get in there? So what's like a good balance of people to be creating and sharing while also trying to get into some of the magazines that they really appreciate?
Ooh, it's such a personal question, and I think starting with, "Why am I doing this? What do I really want to get out of this? How much time am I willing to put into it?" And I think, hitting publish on your own blog is very easy and it's there, but publications can bring more people. Like when I had a piece in the Huffington Post, they sent out a push notification on Apple News for my story. And those are resources that you can't get on your own, or it takes a really long time to build those kind of eyeballs. So that's a really hard question and a very personal question. I would say something like, I'm going to pitch this piece to 10 places. And if it doesn't land, I'm just going to publish it. And I had to do that with a really big piece that I wrote. I went on a 10-day off-roading rally as a writer in Baja, Mexico. It was awesome. If the travel writing industry were what it was 15, 20 years ago, I think I could have totally landed it with a big spread in a magazine. And I just know the travel writing industry is so different. So I put it on Medium, right? And that was me just selling my poems on the bus, right? And just being like, yeah, here's the story I wrote, and how many people read it? Maybe a few hundred. But like I played my part. I did my role and we can only do what's in our control. And getting published is so subjective. I mean, I like to tell people every piece that has gone viral or mini viral was rejected first. And so these pieces that, went on later to success, the very pieces were rejected. It's so subjective.
What makes a good poem, article, like when you see it, what you're as a professional,
Yeah.
like I think for a normal person, it's like we read something and it resonates and we just know we love it, but we don't know why it's so
Mhm.
good. What do
Mhm.
you look for? Like what do all the greatest stories have in common?
I think one is surprise, where you're like, "Oh, there's, this poem that says, 'In this uncontainable night.'" And you're like, "Uncontainable?" I would have never chosen that word. That word wouldn't have even been on the menu of what I would have chosen? So that's kind of a surprise and a little bit more heart and I think risk as well. So what is this author risking? The book I'm reading right now, she talks about a lot of things where it's like, people are gonna be mad about that, or that's not something that moms talk about? And I think risk is a huge element, talking about things that are a little beyond what most people are willing to talk about.
I think the first time I realized that people were maybe this is just when I was conscious. Like obviously read a lot of magazines and articles, but when I picked up a copy of David Sedaris's book is when I
Mhm.
realized, oh, people can actually write books of just stories, just like they're
Yeah.
random stories and they are so hilarious. And
Yeah.
I feel like he was kind of the first person that I started reading that was just storytelling, like full
Yeah.
on storytelling. And I I was he's just such an interesting writer. Just the way that that he decides how to tell different stories, and I find him to be very interesting. And then a friend of mine also gave me a book. I think the title is I was told there'd be cake.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, it was another book that was kind of similar." And so now I really appreciate this art form, and, although that's not the kind of writing that I do, but as we're chatting, I'm thinking, "Oh, I think that that would be really interesting to pitch a story, to a magazine that would be more of like an actual story of something that happened, because that's how we relate to other people.
Mhm.
That's why people like fiction because it's a story that maybe we went through it, maybe we had someone else go through it, but you're really learning about the human condition. But to me, it feels like obviously it's very different writing nonfiction, like a business book versus fiction versus a novel. So is
Mhm.
this your first novel that you're writing?
Yeah.
So what's that experience?
Oh my goodness. It's wild, and it's such a long you're like, "How do I keep track of all this? I need a spreadsheet." And it's just taken me so long. Um, and you can make stuff up, so that's really fun, but also overwhelming. Like, anything could happen. It's so overwhelming. So just really trying to remember to write it for me, and it's having to hype yourself up. There's a really important part of I have my kind of finish framework, which is my acronym for how to actually get work done, and the H stands for hype. And it's there's so much needed when you're writing a novel because it goes on for so long. And you have to write like your crappy first draft lasts years. And so you're like, I'm used to being like, the cycle is like this, right? Where it's like, first draft, I finish it, I publish it, next one, do, 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 do. And a novel is like, so the like crappy first draft goes on forever. And you just feel like this is never going to be anything. This is terrible. This sucks. And then you have to be like, shut up. I will write this and this will be better and it will be awesome. And I can't wait.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it definitely feels like a lot of work, especially a lot of work that no one sees. Like you're writing on
Mhm.
maybe you and your editor or you and a group, but a friend of mine just started writing a novel and I'm getting text messages from him like every week, like just like the crying emoji, like, I don't know what's going on.
I know. Yeah.
It's
Especially with ADHD, I think it's really hard. Like, definitely had to just create a spreadsheet with all the subplots and like where to like tropes that kind of show up or inside jokes and where does something start and where does it end. And then you want to edit something, but it feels like a house of cards. Like if you pull one card out, what am I messing up somewhere else?
Oh my gosh. Well, good luck with your novel.
Thank you.
You're over on Instagram, you share lots of writing tips, you share lots of
Mhm.
stories, and it's really fun to watch you online. Thank you for helping all of us writers to become better writers. I always ask everyone, all my guests at the
Mhm.
end, what is one activity that the listeners can do in 10 minutes or less to live a more creative and fulfilling life?
10-minute dance party. I had this the other day. I had like an extra 10 minutes and I was like, should I like do a micro learning on a podcast or like, like this like maximizing. And I was like, dance party. And I put on some Pitbull, which I highly recommend, and had a dance party. Felt great. It was super fun.
I love that. Dance parties are the best. And,
Mhm.
you can jam out to Pink Pony Club and do your dance.
Pink Pony Glam. Yeah. And I love to sing. I have a playlist called Belting. That's like my favorite songs to just sing at the top of my lungs. And yeah, just music.
Awesome. Well, Paulette, thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate all of your advice and tips. And I know a lot of people have a dream of writing a book or publishing an article or just getting out there with their words. So thank you for the work that you do and the art that you create in the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Kate. And thank you to everyone who is out there trying to make beauty and succeeding in making beauty more than you know you are. We need it.
Yes. Ugh, I love that. I hope this episode inspired you in some way to move forward in your creative dreams. Maybe this is your push to pitch an article in a magazine that you've been really excited to get into, or publish some more of your work just to get a little bit more exposure and see what resonates with other people. To learn more about Paulette, go to pauletteperhach.com. You'll find more about her books, essays, coaching, and of course, her writing community. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, go create something.